Hello everyone, this is Saumya Grover, Assistant Professor, Jagannath University. We will start with the Unit 3, which is Introduction to Newspaper in this class. So let's start with the unit. In this unit, we will study the concept of newspaper, the elements of newspaper, some print media terminologies. Newspaper is a publication containing news, information and advertising, usually printed on low-cost paper called newsprint. It is the printed means of conveying current information. It may be general or special interest, most often published daily or weekly. The first printed newspaper was published in 1605. Even before the birth of Christ, the Romans posted news sheets called Acta Diurna. In public places, the Chinese and Koreans were using wood-carved type and paper for printing. Several centuries before these appeared in the Europe. In the 16th century, when printing had come to Europe, the Venetian government printed a small news sheet which could be purchased for a gazette. The use of the word gazette, which refers to newspapers, has survived to this day too. Before newspapers, let's discuss what is print media. History and management of print media. It is one of the oldest and basic forms of mass communication. It includes newspapers, weeklies, monthlies, and other forms of printed journals. Even after the advent of electronic media, the print media has not lost its charm or relevance. Print media has the advantage of making a longer impact on the minds of receiver with more in-depth reporting and analysis. Importance of print media. It delivers one topic at a time and one thought at a time. Best option for defined target audience. Excellent medium for carrying supplemental elements. Excellent for advertisers as there is a variety of choice. Written words are more credible. This is the first newspaper known as Acta Diurna, the Romans which posted. Recent developments on the internet are posing major threats to its business. Paid circulation is declining in most countries, and advertising revenue, which makes up the bulk of a newspaper's income, is shifting from print to online. Newspapers are primary mass medium from which people receive news. The research results show that newspapers reach more people than any other medium do. And by every measure, newspaper industry overpower all other media, be it in advertising revenue and in size of audience. A newspaper article on news is valued more than television or radio program, and newspaper content is considered more credible and accurate. It can carry a rich mix of news, features, articles, columns, cartoons, graphics, editorial, etc. And readers can select what they want from the entire content. The modern newspaper is a combination of elements from many societies and many periods of time. It has thrived even in the face of competition from technologies such as radio and television. Recent developments on the internet. Newspapers are primary mass medium from which people receive news. The research results show that newspapers reach more people than any other medium do, and by every other medium, be it advertising, revenue, and in the size of audience. Unlike other mass media, newspapers influence people in a many significant ways. A newspaper article or news is valued more than television or radio programs, and newspaper content is considered more credible and accurate. Capability to be used for future references make newspaper people's favorable medium, especially for the middle and working class, for they can use it after their working hours too. Diversity of content is another feature in this medium. It can carry a rich mix of news, features, articles, columns, cartoons, graphics, editorials, etc. And the readers can select what they want from the entire content. Some people prefer sports page and they read it first while others look for political news and some other for stock market. Selectively and content diversity make newspapers a real mass medium. This is not possible in the case of radio and television. Characteristics. One of the chief characteristics of a newspaper is that they offer extensive news coverage and in-depth treatment of news. They provide large variety of coverage through different kinds of writings. Most of the newspapers are of general interest as these are meant for the general public. Only a few newspapers are of special interest. The general interest newspapers usually carry current news covering political events, crime, business, culture, sports, and opinions, editorials, columns, etc. Newspapers use photographs to illustrate stories. They also use other illustrations and cartoons. Other specific features of newspapers are editorial opinions, sports column or a sports section, weather news and forecasts, advice columns, reviews of movies, plays, restaurants, etc. Newspapers also include gossip columns, comic strips, and other entertainment related material such as crosswords, sudoku, and horoscopes. Humor section, food section, etc. Compared with other developing countries, the Indian press is relatively free and unregulated. Predominance of news-oriented content. There are three types of content in newspapers: news, views, and advertisements. Of these, news overshadows the other because newspapers are primarily meant for dissemination of news. Regular periodicity. Newspaper may be published daily or weekly. Periodicity may vary, but regularity should be kept. Every newspaper keeps a particular regularity in publication. Future reference facility. Being a print medium, newspapers can be kept for future use. This archiving ability makes newspaper one of the main sources of historical research. Choice of the time of use. Unlike television and radio, we can read newspapers at any time. Some read in the morning while others in the evening after work. This facility increases the popularity of newspapers. The literates medium. Unlike television and radio, newspaper demands literacy from the part of the audience. Low cost. Compared to other media, newspaper is a cost-effective medium. Anybody can afford a newspaper as it needs no hidden charges or other accessories. Electronic media requires power supply and the new media need digital technology. Multiple users. Many readers can read a copy of the newspaper simultaneously or separately. Textual medium. Text is the soul of newspaper, though they carry images and graphics as well. Let's talk about the strength of a newspaper. It reaches a huge number of people in a given geographic area. Its exposure to an ad is not limited. Readers can go back to the message again and again if so desired. It has multiple content and variety. Newspapers are cheap source of information. Short lead time for placing ad is given. Reader control exposure. It fits into the schedule more easily as it can be read individually. It can also be used for coupons. It provides puzzles, crosswords, movie schedule as well. Weaknesses. The first weakness of a newspaper is that the ad has to compete against the clutter of other advertisers, including the joint ads run by supermarkets and department stores, as well as the ads of the competitors. The poor photo reproduction limits the creativity of the artist or the graphic designer. Newspapers are a price-oriented medium. Most ads are for sales. A newspaper has a short life. It has low attention-getting capabilities as compared with electronic media. It has a poor reproduction quality. It is only for the literates. Here are few of the famous newspapers with the headlines of the major events which happened in the world earlier in the history. This is News Chronicle, a newspaper which is informing about the death of Hitler. The News newspaper, when it informed about the Einstein's death. As you can see the date, it recorded April 18, 1955. It was Monday. The first test tube baby, also known as the IVF baby, was Louis. She was the first baby, and Evening News was the newspaper who broadcasted about her. The Hindustan Times edition of January 31st, which was Saturday, when Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated. Again, the very famous incident when the Titanic sank. So this is the Boston Daily Globe newspaper which gave the information about it. The National News newspaper when Lincoln was shot dead. It is of 1866. It was Saturday, April 14 in Washington. So this is how the newspaper covered this incident. You can go through the paper quality, you can check the font, you can check the text and the picture quality as well, which is very different from what we have today. If we check all the newspapers, you will see how their font and the size and the format is very much different from the newspapers we see today. All these newspapers are a history now, but we can still have a look at them just to know that how the newspapers were initiated. Again, this newspaper, the font and the spacing between the headlines. In today's newspaper, you will not see that much of white space which you are seeing in the newspapers earlier. The historic day of 1945, World War II, when Japan was attacked by the US Army on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it was the first atomic bomb. The newspaper Los Angeles Times informing about the incident. Let's come to the parts of a newspaper. Number one is the news section. Number two is the photojournalism. Number three is the opinion section. Number four is the editorial section. Number five, the entertainment section. Number six, the sports section. Number seven, the advertising section. The news section is always the first in a newspaper. News is the reason for the existence of the newspaper, so it makes sense that this would be featured most prominently. The front page is usually devoted to stories from the local community, state, national and international news events. The rest of the section will offer both national and international news. Next, there is a local news section devoted to newsworthy stories from around the region or city the newspaper covers. Photojournalism. Photojournalism is a particular form of journalism where the collection, editing, and presentation of news material for the publication is done. That creates images in order to tell a story, a news story. It is now usually understood to refer only to still images, but in some cases the term also refers to video used in broadcast journalism. Opinion section. An editorial is a type of journalism article that is meant to persuade the reader to think a certain way about an issue. Editorials can be written about local, national, or international issues. The opinion section will usually include editorials written by prominent national writers. Also included in this section is letter to the editors, where readers are able to get their opinions and viewpoints about issues published in the paper. An editorial cartoon, also known as a political cartoon, is an illustration or comic strip containing a political or social message that usually relates to current events or personalities. Editorial cartoons can usually be found on the editorial page of most newspapers. Sports section. The sports section of a newspaper featuring information on local sports events including high school sports are covered in this section, both on a regional and national level. Even international sports news is also covered. Entertainment section. The entertainment section of a newspaper has feature articles that can focus on different aspects of culture. Human interest stories are most likely to appear in this section. A human interest story is a featured story that discusses a person or persons in an interactive or emotional way. It presents people and their problems, concerns, or achievements in a way that brings about interest or sympathy in the reader or viewer. Diverse topics as food, fashion, the arts, trends, music, film, gaming, and a variety of other interests are likely to appear in the entertainment section. Comics, advice columns, and horoscopes will usually be included in this section. Advertising section. This section contains classified advertisements, display classified advertisements, and display advertisements. Role of newspaper. A newspaper is any printed periodical or work containing public news or comments on public news. Each newspaper tries to win the heart and loyalty of its readers through news and views, articles, pictures, poems, cartoons, editorials, presentation techniques, and exclusive stories and news items. It censors the corrupt and the erring. It airs public grievances that reflects public opinion through letters to the press. Napoleon feared 4 hostile newspapers more than 1,000 bayonets. According to him, a newspaper is a grumbler and censorer, a giver of advice, a regent of sovereigns, a tutor of nations. Gopal Krishna Gokhale considered the newspapers to be the roarers and the sentinels of the voice of people. In India, newspapers have a vital role to play and an important duty to perform, both as vox populi, voice of the people, and as builder of public opinion. In this sense, it is the people's university, book, pulpit, platform, forum, theatre, and counselor all in one. There is no interest, literacy, social, political, religious, commercial, economic, scientific, technological, agricultural, mechanical, cultural, and histrionic, and so on and so forth, which is not covered by the newspaper. Approximately 17% of people read newspapers, and out of these, not even halves of the people read editorials, comments, or serious initial articles. The rest content them by reading the headlines or the topical news. Young men read sports news and film reviews. The businessmen confine themselves to market reports about shares, stocks, and the prices of gold, silver, and essential commodities. Only old retired people pore over the newspaper from end to end, and that too because they have no other pastime to pass time. Young men read sports news and film reviews. The businessmen confine themselves to market reports about shares, stocks, and the prices of gold, silver, and essential commodities. Only old retired people pore over the newspaper from end to end, and that too because they have no other pastime to pass time. This shows that the number of those who have genuine interest in newspaper is very low. But it is these people, national and state leaders, Teachers, lawyers, philosophers, academicians, technocrats, and bureaucrats who form the intellectual and intelligent section of the Indian society. They speak for the common people and voice their grievances against mismanagement of public affairs. They serve as a link between the rulers and the rated, the government and the people, and complete the chain of action and reaction. The newspapers of India perform their role as guardian of public interest, watchdogs, and a source of all kind of information. They are not state controlled as in USSR and Pakistan. They enjoy freedom of expression. Of course, they must function within the bounds of the law. They must not infringe the law regarding libel and defamation. Otherwise, they would be liable to penal action. In India, the newspapers keep a powerful check on the misdeeds, the tyranny, and the corrupt practices of the government. However, all newspapers do not play a positive and constructive role expected of them. There is a section of newspaper in India which indulges in blackmail, extortion of money, and distortion of facts and news. This yellow journalism is despicable. Such newspapers violate all ethical standards and adopt a purely mercenary and anti-national attitude. This is a substandard and base journalism. What Jefferson said about newspaper in America applies to newspaper in India also. Chapter 1 Truth. Chapter 2 Possibilities. Chapter 3 Improvements. Chapter 4 Lies. Chapter 5 Blatant Lies. And the first chapter is the shortest, which is the truth. Newspapers in the Renaissance country should regard their profession as a noble mission of educating and enlightening people. They should impose certain moral and national restraints and discipline upon themselves. They should refrain from indulging its rumors and turning out biased information and distorted truth for ulterior motives. As purveyors of news and views, they should play the role of people's university and serve the motherland as guardian of people's liberty. Elements of a newspaper include the name of the newspaper, the section, headline. Headline is which sums up the story or article. It's usually in the larger font and often in bold. The drop head is the secondary headline that provides additional information about the story. Byline, it's the author of the article. It appears at the beginning of the article. Dateline, it has two elements, the name of the place from where a story originated and the date on which it was written. It usually appears in bold letters. Lead, it briefly gives the most important information. Body, it supplies additional information. It's divided into small paragraphs. Photo, they are used to make a text easier to understand or more interesting. Caption, it used to describe a photograph. It is also known as outline in the US. Newspaper vocabulary. There are few vocabulary words and terminologies which are used in a newspaper. Let's go through them. Font. Font is the size and the style of type of writing. Headline. It is the extra large font across top of front page placed above or below the masthead. A headline summarizes the story in a few words. They are of different variety, banners, decks, summary decks, hammers, etc. Wire service. A news agency or the organization that gathers news and transmits it to individual subscribing newspaper AP, CP, Reuters. Tabloid, a smaller format, half broadsheet folded, often preferred by publisher of local papers or commuter papers, and the sensationalist press National Enquirer. Broadsheet, full-size newspaper averaging 6 columns to a page. A column, the vertical division of a page, or opinion or comment expressed by a regular writer. Masthead, information about the newspaper such as the name of the publishing company, names of the officers of the company, location of editorial offices, editorship and distribution facts, all usually found at the top of the editorial page. Hard news, up to the minute news and events that are reported immediately. Soft news, background information or human interest stories. Paparazzi, international press corps who compete for stories usually of a sensational nature. Reporter, a person hired to rush to the scene and phone back information as soon as possible or to key the report into a word processing terminal at the newspaper office. Layout, the position of stories, advertisements, photos and graphics on the page. Deadline, the assigned time for stories to be submitted in order to make the issue going to press. Handout, publication material issued by any individual or organization. Inverted pyramid, it is a style of news writing in which most important news written in the beginning. ISPR, it is the military information department that works for the promotion of image of armed forces. It is the mouthpiece of forces. Kill, when a news item is finally dropped or excluded from going on air and news being published. Lead, the main story of a newspaper. The most important story is called lead. Leader, the first editorial on editorial page is called the leader. Masthead, such place where the name of the newspaper logo is written. News hole, available space or time for a news story is called news hole. Noise, something that interrupted the communication process. Opinion leader, those individuals who influence thinking on a particular subject. Off the record, such information which can't be published or printed without the permission of the person who shares the information. On the record, someone says anything with full authority. PFUJ, Pakistan Federal Unit of Journalists. It is a country-wide association working for the journalists and their right in Pakistan. IFJ, International Federation for Journalists. It is a worldwide association working for the journalists and their rights. Print line, the name of publisher and place where the newspaper publishes. It is in the bottom of the page. Leadership survey, detailed analysis of a newspaper audience on specific issue. Scoop, extraordinary exclusive story that is not available on other newspapers. Slant, to make a story based on particular viewpoint. Slug, a brief hint in one or two words about story written by the writer for the attention of the editor. It contains 2 or 3 words. Beat, a specific area or subject that is looked after and covered by a reporter. Blind interview. It is such interview in which the identity of the interviewee is kept confidential. Box. Any news item in a newspaper that is encircled can be an important story. Break. When a story is divided into two parts and the remaining news on next page. Story must be continued on next page. Bulldog. The early edition of a newspaper is called Bulldog. Bulletin. Bulletin is specific news item that is finally selected and going to be broadcast. Byline. Name of the reporter that appears on the top of the story. Classified. The advertisement appears on the specific page, usually small advertisements in small boxes. Caption. The brief description of a photograph written under the photo in the newspaper. Stringer. Any correspondent who works on story basis working of a newspaper or any organization. It is also known as a freelancer. Curtain raiser. The information about any upcoming event. Flag. It is the name of the newspaper on editorial page. Fourth estate. The press or media is considered the fourth pillar of state. Deadline. A specific time in newspaper after this news can't be published. Dateline. The place or the location and the city or from where a story originates. Year. The small box on the front or back on the newspaper which carry advertisement. Intro. Opening paragraph of any news story. Embargo. This word used in media, politics and military, but the meaning is different every time. The specific time restriction given by someone or a deadline before which a story can't be telecasted. Breaking news. Special news of important event that is happening. Creed. The telegraphic typewriter by which offices receive message from newspapers. Skyline. A banner come above the nameplate on page number. Splash. The main news story on the front page of a newspaper. Steamer. A multi-column headline on the top of a page. Crossline. A single line heading placed on the top of the story. Feedback. Reaction of a receiver to a message from a sender. Gatekeeper. The individual or group of people who govern, manage or control the travels of news items in the communication channel. ABC. Audit Bureau Circulation. Advertising. Persuasive messages used to sell products or ideas, also used to inform consumers about new products. Advertising is the commercial basis of most media. That's all for the unit Introduction to Newspaper. We will discuss about the other mediums of print media like magazine and books, and we will also study about types of different newspapers, types of magazines in the next unit. That's all for today. Thank you very much.